Lauren, and I am here to share some education about mental health. So, today I'm going to be talking about obsessive compulsive disorder. Now, I noticed that a lot of people associate OCD with cleaning, and that can be one like type of OCD, but it's a lot more than that, and it's a very, very painful disorder. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with kind of introducing what OCD is in general. So, essentially, OCD is where a person will have excessive thoughts, intrusive thoughts, and they'll be repetitive kind of thoughts. It's hard for them to get off the thought just because of the way that their brain is wired. Um, and so what they'll do to kind of, and it's they'll the thoughts can cause like a lot of anxiety. They essentially the hallmark of OCD is these thoughts causing extreme anxiety, and so the extreme anxiety causes people to feel the need to do compulsions, which are repetitive behaviors which are done in the hopes that they'll relieve anxiety. Now, the thing is, these repetitive behaviors, the compulsions, they actually just reinforce the idea that the thing that they're anxious about is something to be anxious about. So we'll get into treatments for OCD later. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into common types of OCD. Now, you may have heard of some of these. So one of the common types is checking. And this is where someone will have to, go back and recheck the stove a bunch of times. They're, really worried that they left it on. The obsession is the, thoughts of the house burning down, or something like that. Or it could be like, their child touching the stove, whatever. And the compulsion is to go and to check. Um, this can this can include all types of stuff. People can check, lights. People can even check data. They'll, go back and recheck data because maybe they're concerned that they're going to make a mistake or, whatever. And that could be like in a workplace environment or even if you're just like reading, whatever. OCD doesn't really care where you are. So the next one I'm going to go into, and there's TV shows about this, and people may have heard of this, but I'm going to go into like a deeper explanation so you guys can get a better idea of what it is. So it's hoarding. Now, hoarding is the inability to throw out, it could be anything, objects, food, any type of, just it could be anything. Um, and so trash. Um, and the thought is like the obsession is maybe this item could hold some special purpose. Like for instance, I have a friend that even it's like tests and it's homework and notes from years ago. Like this person's in college and they're even like saving notes from high school. And, you would think possibly, maybe it will be, helpful, but I mean, they have like piles and piles of this. And they even, it would be helpful for them to get rid of it so they would have, more room, it would be cleaner. But they say, it's just they get really high anxiety. They're like, no, but what if I need this later? People feel like it holds some special purpose. And, a lot of the times there's a trauma. Maybe, somebody passed away or, whatever. And so, but I mean, there's a lot of different causes or theories and ideas about why OCD happens, but I'll get into those later. So, anyway, I'm going to move on to contamination. Now, this says contamination slash mental contamination. So contamination, just the contamination one, not the mental contamination, is where the person's very concerned about germs, and so they'll kind of obsess on it. They'll be like worried about diseases, that kind of stuff. And so these people could wash their hands compulsively, feel the need to put on hand sanitizer compulsively. Even like with food, like if they notice one little thing, maybe if something is like discolored, even if it's from like, the lettuce or the tomato making it a little whatever soggy, um, you know, they'll be really, really concerned and they could just throw the entire meal out, or they could possibly even make themselves throw up because they're so concerned about, getting sick, these germs. Now, mental contamination has more to do with, let me give an example. So, there was this, I heard this from someone. There was this book, and the book was talking about really horrible child abuse happening to someone. And so what happened is the person got vicarious trauma, which is where you get trauma from hearing about someone else's trauma. And PTSD can cause OCD symptoms. But like I said, I'll go into a full explanation of possible causes later. Um, but every time they would just see the cover of this book, they would be like, they would feel like grossed out, and they would want to get away from the cover of the book because they thought that, the abuse thoughts were going to be contaminating them. They didn't want to, it made them feel sick. So for instance, it could even happen with, let's say there's a certain person that, reminds you of just something gross. Let's say they like pick their nose one time. And so you could even be so like too anxious to even be around them. The compulsion will be to totally avoid them because, just the thoughts of it are like just gross you out so much, and it's like you feel like you need to clean your brain. It's like just even having the thoughts of it make you feel really anxious, and so you just want to get them out like in any way you can, just so you feel right, just so you feel clean. I don't know if that makes any sense, and if it doesn't, you need further clarification, please let me know in the comments. So the next one I'm going to move on to is intrusive thoughts. This is sometimes referred to as pure O, OCD. And this is where the compulsions take place internally, as opposed to, the compulsions that we can see in the other ones with, checking a stove or whatever. These compulsions happen inside the mind. For instance, okay, actually, how you can think of it is, okay, in our society, or, maybe the way you were raised or whatever, we're kind of taught that maybe certain thoughts and certain things are, are appropriate, like those are things that, are good to think, you're allowed to think. And so because OCD, it causes excessive intrusive thoughts, people with this illness will have thoughts that their brain has deemed inappropriate or unacceptable. They could be having thoughts about, what if I harm a child? What if because like I said, these are intrusive thoughts. They pop up. Just because you have a thought doesn't mean that you're going to do that. Like, the reality is, our brains, when we're going through life, it's taking in so much different information. Like if you watch the news, you could hear about rape. If you could hear about kids being killed, in the Middle East. You could hear about so many different things, violence, etc. So your brain's taking in that information. It would make sense that maybe at some point a thought would pop up about it, or whatever. So I'll take the example of this one. An important thing to bring up is so within the pure O, within the intrusive thoughts, there's different themes. For instance, some people get really, their brain deems sexual thoughts inappropriately. Like maybe someone could have a thought, a college student could have a thought about having sex with their teacher, or an image pops up of having sex with the teacher, and that thought feels so inappropriate to them and so against, what they actually want to do. When they're having these intrusive thoughts, people with OCD, they generally don't want to do whatever, the thoughts are. There's something called ego dystonic and ego syntonic. Now, these intrusive thoughts within obsessive compulsive disorder, it's ego dystonic, which means it goes against the person's values, the person's wants, um, their whole personality, you know? And so that's why these thoughts can be so upsetting, because it's just like, no, but that's not, like, why are you, why are you coming in there? That's not me, you know? And so it's, I mean, and it can even be stuff like pedophilia. Like, you could get an image of a child, or the thought could pop in your head, like, wait, what if I, like, abuse a child? Like, what if I, and so the person is really, really upset. And it doesn't have anything to do with that person wanting to abuse a child. It has nothing to do with that. Thoughts pop into our head all the time. We have all different types of thoughts. Just because you have a thought doesn't mean it has anything to do with you. And so, like I said, that's why these thoughts can be so upsetting. You can even get, one of the themes could be relationship OCD. And, you could have thoughts about, is this person cheating on me? And these thoughts will replay. And the compulsion is to obsess over these thoughts. Like, notice how when I brought up, the college student, obsessing about the professor. And so what the person will do, the compulsion is they will just constantly be thinking about, like, why is this? No, I don't want it to be this. What could this be connected to? How do I get rid of this? It's just constant circling. And one of the things is when someone with OCD will try to get a thought out of their head, they're just kind of like, I can't think about this. And so what that does, though, is it sends a signal to the brain that tells the brain that this thought is somehow important. And this thought is, so even when they're really trying so hard not to think about it, it's still in their mind because they're trying so hard not to think about it. And so it keeps popping up. But and I'm not laughing or anything at people with OCD. I'm just saying, like, this is, like, how severe it gets for people who suffer from it. And so, and a lot of people with OCD understand that their thoughts are irrational. They understand that, it makes people feel crazy because, they know how irrational it is, but at the same time, it's like they feel like they can't stop because the anxiety is so high. So it's a very, very difficult illness for those who struggle with it. And I mean, there's so many, like, for instance, people who, let's bring up the concept of jealousy. So when people think of jealousy, they think of it as automatically connected to insecurity. They attach negative connotations to it, all this type of stuff. My personal opinion is, if someone struggles with jealousy, if that's just something that, it's just something they struggle with, I don't think that automatically means that they're a bad person, or they'll do bad things. I think it's how the person manages their jealousy. So that's just my little tidbit on that. Because I personally don't struggle with that, but I mean, I have friends who struggle with that, and they're still great friends because they manage it differently. I don't know, just shaming someone for having an emotion or whatever. Okay, but anyway, that's beside the point. Here we go. So actually, jealousy, how it's connected to OCD is, okay, so for certain people who are suffering from OCD, jealousy actually isn't an emotion that they're experiencing. Let me, and here, I'll explain this. So someone with OCD, because their brain is, just picking up on all these little details and obsessing and replaying stuff, when somebody, like, let's say, they see someone who possibly has, maybe something more than them, or, they have a nice car and you don't have a nice car or whatever. So even if you just naturally, like, without your OCD obsessions, you don't really care, this person has, a more expensive car or whatever, your OCD is going to pick up on all these little details and it's going to replay it. And so it's going to be hard to get your mind off of the obsessing. And so you can have feelings of inferiority and jealousy just because your brain is more hyper focused on details as opposed to someone who doesn't have the OCD, you know? So yeah, it's really, really hard. Like, people with OCD can suffer from feelings of inferiority just because they can't stop replaying the stuff. You know, so you can see how complex this illness is. Um, but moving on, I want to get into the final one. I mean, there's so many different types of OCD. But I'm just showing kind of common types. Otherwise, we'd be here for like hours. So this one is symmetry and orderliness. And so this is where, you know, I feel like this is kind of something pretty well known. Like, let's say, you know, a picture is hanging asymmetrically. A person with this illness, or this specific type of OCD will, you know, need to correct that. It needs to be just right. And the thing is, the reason it needs to be just right is a lot of the time when people are doing these outside compulsions, or, you know, also the pure inside compulsions, it's they're trying to relieve, well, you know, they're trying to relieve an obsession. So example is, okay, let's say somebody is thinking like, oh, if I don't, you know, make this painting, you know, straight, my sister's gonna die. You know, so they'll get these horrible anxiety thoughts that, you know, are just so overwhelming for them. And so the way to manage it, the repetitive, intrusive thoughts, the way to manage that is just to, you know, maybe if I make this just right, this will be okay. Because the brain will just come up with these compulsions, and it's just to relieve your anxiety. It's just to make that go away. And so, you know, and this could even go into things like, you know, writing. Like, if you notice like one little letter's off, you know, you'll need to rewrite the entire thing because, you know, you just have this feeling that it needs to be just right. And also, and I feel like this is maybe more common. I'm not sure of statistics with this, so that's not what I mean. But I just mean I've seen a lot of people who have this. Okay, so let's say you're doing leg lifts and you just are lifting one leg, you know? And so after you're done with that leg, you know, I've noticed that some people will feel the need to do the other side, you know, to even it out. That's actually a little bit of, you know, that's the symmetry. And obviously, everybody, you know, it varies in severity. Some people, it's, oh, excuse me, not as bad. Other people, it can take up hours of their day, or even, you know, days. They could have trouble sleeping. Like, for instance, let's go back to the checking. So for some people, something that they struggle with is being concerned about hitting someone with their car. So let's say they're driving to work and they hit a bump. So the intrusive thoughts can come in of, oh my God, did I kill someone? Did I hurt someone? Am I going to get a hit and run? And so they could be sitting at work going over these thoughts, and if it's, you know, they'll just have to leave work and go back to do the compulsion of going back to check to see if someone's hurt, you know? So it can take a lot of time out of your day. And going back to symmetry and order, so with symmetry and order, one of the other things associated with it is magical thinking. And magical thinking is where you think that you can control stuff like with your thoughts. And so, you know, if you imagine it, then that can, you know, manifest as like a reality. You know, you think you can control the outside with, you know, like if you think like, oh, my sister's going to die or whatever, you feel like you're going to, you know, that's going to be caused just by simply having the thought. You know, which can be, very, very scary and frustrating. You know, so that's just what I'm going to cover right now. Like I said, this is a very, very complex subject. And so I kind of just wanted to give like an overview, common symptoms. But now I'm going to move into treatments. There is hope, okay? It's going to be okay. So some of the treatments are medication. It's, they'll use like SSRIs, which are antidepressant. They can also use, Pinkie, this is my kitty cat. Pinkie, are you okay? Pinkie, I love this video. Let me have a, feeling shy. I don't want to look at you guys. My name is Pinkie. I hope you're having a good day. Yahoo, yahoo. Okay, all right, Pinkie, mommy has to get back to work. You're not the star here. No. Okay. Anyway, medication that is commonly used is something called an anxiolytic. And this literally just means, a medication that's specifically used to reduce anxiety. The other thing is there's also like therapy type treatments. There's talk therapy, there's psychoeducation. Psychoeducation is sort of what I'm doing right now, where I'm giving you like knowledge and information on the illness. I'm not a therapist, so I'm not saying like get all your psychoeducation from me. None of that. All right, I'm no expert, but I'm just kind of saying this is a sample or example. So there's also something called rational emotive behavioral therapy. And this was invented by someone named Albert Ellis. And it essentially just has to do with like identifying irrational beliefs. So here's an example. Like, let's say that your friend disrespects you. You go too far, you're pissed. And so, let's say for someone with OCD, they'll get intrusive thoughts about it. They'll replay it. They'll, just not be able to get off of it. Just so angry, so resentful. And it's like, and it's a hard illness to struggle with. And so you're just replaying this. And so with rational emotive behavioral therapy, this is like an example of a possible irrational thought. And this therapy doesn't work for everyone. It's so individual, it depends on the person. But okay, for instance, so what you could do is you could tell yourself, okay, it's nice and I prefer it when my friend respects me. However, they don't have to. Some people aren't going to respect you. That's just how it is. So, I can't expect people to have that respect, And I kind of like, something with that is you should have standards. You should have boundaries. People shouldn't be allowed to disrespect you. They're not allowed to disrespect you. It's like, it's boundary time. Boundaries are important. However, in terms of this therapy, it's just trying to get you to understand and see that it's like, you know what? The reality is they don't have to respect you. And so that identifying that irrational thought can get you, out of that obsession. It's not that they're saying you're not allowed, you shouldn't have boundaries, people can disrespect you, walk all over you. That's not what it's saying. It's saying you just shouldn't have that expectation or that belief that they're always going to respect you, because some people are pieces of shit. That's how it is. And the next one is called, the next treatment is called exposure response, or ERP, and exposure response prevention. And so what it is essentially you are exposing yourself, and this is usually done very slowly. You're slowly taking away the compulsions, and when you take away the compulsions, that can actually help reinforce in your brain that, the anxious thought isn't important. And it's not, for instance, let's say someone has a fear of leaving the stove on. So the treatment for that is, let's say that this person is, they even have to go home from work. They cannot sleep, and, they're setting their alarm for every hour to go check it. What we would do is, for setting and like I said, I'm not a therapist. Okay, this is just an example. What they would do is we would slowly cut that down. Like, instead of every hour you set your alarm, you do it to every 3 hours, and then maybe every 5 hours. And you just kind of slowly cut it down. And when you notice, that you don't do the compulsion and everything is still okay, the house doesn't burn down, then your brain kind of becomes a little bit, I think there's like rewiring. It just becomes a little bit more secure that you don't need to be doing the compulsion, you know? Um, and it's like, with ERP or any of, these treatments, it's, it may not be a cure. It may not be able to completely get all the symptoms away, but, it can make it so your life is manageable and your life feels worth living. Because, I mean, this stuff can be so severe. People can start feeling so hopeless. They could even start feeling suicidal because it's just so, I mean, it's just, it could be horrific, very overwhelming, you know? Um, and so, and with the pure O type, because, the obsessions aren't, um, outside, the obsessions are internal, what you can do is, something you would do to maybe help with that one is you can write down your thoughts in a journal. That could help kind of get that out. For some people, though, that just reinforces the compulsive thinking because they're still thinking about it. They're writing it and it's still in their mind. For some people, it helps, though. The other thing is the main thing with the pure O, and I mean all of them really, is what you have to do is, okay, you're obsessing on this thought, you're stuck on this thought, it's replaying. What you have to do is allow your brain to jump to another thought. Whatever you have to do, take a deep breath, go for a walk. You need to get your brain to jump to another thought, and what that does is it strengthens the neural networks each time that you do that. Each time that you're able to jump to a different thought, not go back to the compulsive thinking, et cetera, it becomes easier and easier to jump to a different thought. You can listen to music, you can put on like brown noise or pink noise, black noise. I don't know if that's a thing. White noise, whatever, on your computer. There's, relaxation music you can listen to. And I'm talking about like specifically just like little like sounds, like, when you have like study music or like fall asleep music, rain sounds, et cetera, et cetera. But it's whatever works for the person, and it's a journey. When you start to want to manage your OCD and you go in for treatments, you're gonna have to, hey, maybe you're lucky and the first treatment works, but for some people you may have to explore more. And so now I'm going to be going into possible causes of OCD, and the important thing to note is that we don't know exact causes. We can't know anything for sure, at least at this point. But research is kind of guiding us, or it's guided us so far to some possible ideas and theories. So the first one is communication problems between the front parts of the brain and deeper structures, particularly having to do with communication involving the neurotransmitter serotonin. And to kind of help get a better idea of this, hopefully, I have the beautiful brain. And right here, so we have the frontal cortex, and then right here, this pink thing right here in the front is the anterior cingulate cortex. Down here we have the orbital frontal cortex, then basal ganglia, and the thalamus. So what's thought actually to be the cause of because remember how I said it's excessive, intrusive, unwanted, involuntary thoughts. So overactivity here in the anterior cingulate cortex is thought to be the cause of the excessive thoughts, like just the amount of thoughts that are coming out, and why it's so hard to get them to stop. So, because research has shown, when this is kind of settled down, the symptoms improve. So that's what we know so far in terms of brain structure. Now, another thing is, so researchers think that there could possibly be a difference between adult onset OCD and OCD that appears in childhood, meaning like causes are different. So with child OCD, they're thinking that genes are partially involved. You already kind of have the genes for it. And then events, traumatic events, or even things that are considered ordinary events, turn those genes on. And if it's ordinary events, if it's, whatever, it doesn't make you weak. It doesn't, none of that. It just means that your particular brain is impacted by that particular event. There's really no barometer of, what a person should be affected by, because everyone's brain is unique, everyone's chemistry is unique. So some things, when they interact, there you go. And then for adult OCD, it's thought to be a lot more environmental as opposed to having, any significant amount being due to genes. Once again, it could be a traumatic event, could be, the ordinary event, whatever. Now, there's also something called PANDAS, PANDAS. It's an acronym. And this actually this is an infection, and it's sudden onset, and it causes, symptoms of obsessive compulsive disorder. So, this is kind of the stuff we have so far, some ideas we have right now about what causes OCD. Like I said, this can be a very, very debilitating disorder. It varies in severity, but I mean, these thoughts can really take over someone's life. And like I said, it doesn't make someone weak. It doesn't make someone, a quitter. None of that. It's a very, very hard disease, but, cognitive behavioral therapy, medications, there's so much out there that can help symptoms improve. For instance, like I've heard of one person where going to the beach or taking an hour to 2 hour hike daily, that really, really helps settle the thoughts. Who knows if it's because, you're burning all that energy, so you don't have enough like energy in your brain to keep like, going over stuff, or, is the sun and all that kind of stuff, exercise, increase the amount of serotonin you have, who knows. But, there's lots of different treatments out there, and it's not hopeless. There definitely is a chance for recovery, I've heard certain people say that they're cured of their OCD, so I mean, hey, that can happen. There definitely is, I think, an opportunity for everyone and a chance for everyone who suffers from OCD to experience, symptom relief on a certain level. Everybody's different, and we have neuroplasticity. The brain has the ability to make changes. Like I said, I mean, I think I brought up the idea that whenever you're having like a thought, you just get stuck on the thought. Whenever you're able to jump to a different thought and just not let yourself go back there, fighting it, you're building a new neural network, and that'll become stronger over time, and it'll get easier. So yeah. Anyway, that's my presentation on OCD. If you have any questions, please, leave them in the comments. I'm going to post the research links to where I got my information from. If you have any ideas or anything, other videos related to OCD that you'd like me to make, totally let me know. Also, please like or subscribe, or like and subscribe, whatever you like to do, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more mental health. And thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Have a great